Okay, part two of the class today is actually the headlines. Israel, a safe haven for Jews? Come on. Let's look at some of the statistics. In all the wars in the last 71 years, 23,741 Jews have been killed. It's a lot. I received a letter. I don't understand what the celebration is all about. This independence took the lives of 20,000 young Jewish soldiers. What's all the happiness about? Let's look. In the 1920s, 1930s, close to 600 Jews were murdered in the land of Israel. The most dangerous place on earth for a Jew to be was the land of Israel. So what's going on here? It seems like we're on two strikes here. In the 1920s, 1930s, we had almost 600 Jews in pogroms and Arab rioting, murdered. Since the last 71 years, we have 23,741. It's a lot. You look outside the land of Israel. In Pittsburgh, there were 11. In San Diego, there was 1. How can you compare the two? What is this crazy message? What is this lunatic message of coming to Israel, the safe haven? Was this like a joke? A bad one at that. So, let's take it from the top. Listen very closely. Jewish people are in the desert. They send spies to the land of Israel. They come back and they have a report that the land of Israel is impossible to conquer. It's a suicide mission. The cities are fortified. The people are giants. We have no chance. And the people cried out, we are worried about the lives of ourselves, lives of our wives and our children. This is Numbers 14, verse 3. Nachmanides, the Ramban, in two places. One is Numbers 13:2. One is Numbers 13, verse 27. He says that the spies spoke the truth. What they saw, the fortified cities, the giants, it was all truth. Their sin was, that wasn't the sin. We have no chance to overcome. And listen to this closely, folks, because this is the lesson of a lifetime. Just to hear this lesson is important. You always have to look. You always have to look at the can as it travels down the road. You have to look at history. You have to look in a broad perspective. Not today, tomorrow, a year from now. Broad. Think about it. How ironic is it? This generation, they were afraid. They were afraid for their life. To them it was suicidal to come into the land of Israel. So what happens? What happens? Those that claimed that it was suicidal to go into the land of Israel, they were the ones that passed away. For 40 years in the desert, that generation died out. Exactly what the opposite happened. They were worrying about their lives. They paid with their lives by not coming up to the land of Israel. Those that went into the land of Israel survived and flourished in the times of Joshua. Number 2, Elimelech and his family leave the land of Israel. There was a danger of a famine. what happens? Elimelech passes away. And then his two sons, Machlon and Kilion, they're also killed off by God. There's an amazing source. We are told in the book Tosefta, Avodah Zarah, chapter 5, the second law, talks about how living in the land of Israel is equal to all the other commandments, and a person should live in the land of Israel even though it's mostly inhabited by idol worshippers, than living in a city that is outside the land of Israel, that it's mostly inhabited by religious Jews. So that's an amazing concept. And then tells us an amazing line. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, tonight is the big night, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai tells us that what happened to Elimelech and his two sons, that all three of them, even though they didn't pass away at one shot, they all passed away because of a famine. Because of a famine, they ran away from the land of Israel because in the land of Israel there was a famine, or at least there was a suspicion that there was going to be a famine to hit. And that's how they died? But listen to this. The Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai goes on further. This is really amazing. This is like a whammy here. What happened to the people that didn't run away from the land of Israel? The people that didn't run away from the land of Israel during the time of the famine, not only did they not die in the famine, there were tremendous miracles and nobody passed away. When Naomi came back to the land of Israel, is exactly as she left it. There was it wasn't, destroyed. It wasn't barren. Could not believe her eyes. Can you imagine this? They leave the land of Israel because they're afraid of a famine, and that's how they pass away. The same exact story with the spies and the whole generation. We're talking about 600,000 people that passed away in the desert because they were afraid for their lives. They were frightened, and they said to go to the land of Israel, that is suicidal. It's so dangerous in the land of Israel. We have to either stay here where it's safe or go back to Egypt. Same too with Elimelech and his family. They thought they were running away, but God protected the residents of the land of Israel. Amazing. Folks, if you would ask somebody in the 1920s and the 1930s, where's the most dangerous place for a Jew to live, they would tell you the land of Israel. We mentioned 500, 600 Jews were murdered during those years, 20-year space. But folks, if we go past the 30s, in one day in Auschwitz, the amount of Jewish soldiers that we've had over the 71 years in one day in Auschwitz were murdered. We did pay a heavy price for the past 71 years. But outside the land of Israel, it looked good outside the land of Israel in the 20s and 30s. It's like the last place you wanted to be was the land of Israel. But it turned out that really the place to be was the land of Israel. That was where the Jewish people would be saved. Amazing. So you just have to have a deep breath. What seems today to be a truth, you have to look tomorrow, and you have to look the next day, and you have to look in a broad sense. What's coming down the barrel? What's coming our way? And we see these two arrows again, the land of Israel blossoming. We are suffering. It's true. We do have Jews that fall in battle, and we have Jews that fall from Arab terror. True. But on the big scale, you have to look and understand that the direction that God is showing us very clearly, that the safe haven will be the land of Israel. And today, that's not so necessarily, but tomorrow it will be. And if not for tomorrow, in another month from now, and in not another year from now, and in not another year, another 5 years. To understand this point, how the land of Israel is a safe haven for the Jewish people, listen to this. There's an amazing story by the head rabbi of the Panovich Yeshiva in Bnei Brak. His name is Rabbi Kahaneman. Rabbi Kahaneman was the leader of approximately 1,000 Jews in Lithuania in a place called Panovich. In 1940, the Lithuanian government officials approached a group of leading rabbis, including Rabbi Kahaneman, and they asked the rabbis to form a group to travel to America, to receive permission from the Americans to allow 5,000 Polish Jewish refugees who were now residing in Lithuania. The Lithuanians were very, very scared to keep these 5,000 Polish Jewish refugees in their midst. So they went to the rabbis, gave them the documents that they needed to go to America, and 2 rabbis were chosen. One was Rabbi Kahaneman, and the other one was the Kovner rabbi, Rabbi Shapira, Rabbi Dov Shapira. Both of them set out for this mission to go to America, to ask permission, entrance visas for 5,000 Jews. We're talking about 1940. On the way, the Kovner rabbi became very ill and could not continue on the trip. Rabbi Kahaneman had to go ahead on his own. And when he reached a certain place in Europe, he spoke to his family, and there was a decision that was made. The decision was to go to the land of Israel. And it would be worked out that his family and whatever students, they would make their way to the land of Israel. When arriving in the land of Israel, one verse continued to echo in the head of Rabbi Kahaneman. And that verse is what we read in the prophet Joel 3:5. For on the mountain of Zion and in Jerusalem there will be refugee, as Hashem said. And as he arrived in the land of Israel, that echoed in his head. Later on, Rabbi Kahaneman heard the following story from the grandson of the Chafetz Chaim. The grandson told Rabbi Kahaneman, this is first, this is not hearsay, this is first. The grandson said, the last words that my grandfather said was this verse in Joel. Once again, we're talking about, we are talking about the 1933. The Chafetz Chaim passed away. Rabbi Yisrael Meir Kagan passed away in September of 1933. This was just the the beginning of the rise of Hitler. And the grandson said the following: the day before my grandfather passed away, he didn't say anything. Not even one sound came out of his mouth. He was in pain and suffering. However, on the last day of his life, there was a student. Student's name was, his son-in-law, Rabbi Moshe Lundinsky, who was the head of the yeshiva in Radin. He was next to his father-in-law. And all of a sudden, the Chafetz Chaim woke up, opened up his eyes, and he said, "How are you doing?" And his son-in-law said, "Not very well, because there are all types of rumors that are coming out, all types of rumors that are spreading about Hitler, and that he wants to destroy the Jewish people." The last words the Chafetz Chaim said in his life in September 1933 was that on the mountains of Zion and in Jerusalem there will be refuge for the Jewish people, said Hashem. Those were his last words. When Rabbi Kahaneman heard this was the verse he was thinking himself when he and his family were saved from the Holocaust. He heard this verse over and over again. He decided that it was going to be engraved on the building of the Panovich Yeshiva, one of the biggest Talmudic study seminaries in all of Israel. And it's in big letters till this very, very day. That last verse, that here in the land of Israel, this is where the Jewish people will finally find refuge. Number 2. Also, this verse stands out in 1940. There Okay, in 1940, 1941, the Germans came close to the land of Israel. In 1940, 1941, they came close to the northern part of Israel. In 1942, they came close to the south in Egypt, southern part of Israel. And this period of time was called the 200 Days of Fear. The 200 Days of Fear for the Jewish community living in the land of Israel. These were 200 days from May 1942 to November 3rd, 1942, when Rommel was defeated by Montgomery, by the British and other forces in El Alamein in November 1942. There was an amazing time. The Jews were putting plans that they called the Masada on Mount Carmel in the north of Israel. Some of the kibbutzim were handing out poison pills for its members when the Germans come in. There were so many different plans. There were plans by the Jews who lived here to fight. There were plans to retreat. There were plans to evacuate the land of Israel and then hopefully later on come back. People were so frightened. People were so fearful. People were praying. People were learning. People were fasting. The 200 days of tremendous fear in the land of Israel. Listen to some of the miracles that happened. One of these strategic errors was the Battle of El Alamein in North Africa, where the German Panzer Division under the legendary General Rommel, aka the Desert Fox, faced the Allied forces of the British 8th Army under General Montgomery. The battle was a battle of attrition, a slugfest, a blow-for-blow death match. The battle was critical, and Hitler had given Rommel the order, victory or death. However, just minutes before the Allied forces were to overcome, the Germans suddenly stopped firing and appeared over the ridge waving white flags of surrender. Amazing. They rushed to the Allied forces for water. What had happened that forced them to give up? Incredibly, in the Germans' undernourished and underhydrated conditions, they had come across a water pipeline. They shot into it and immediately gulped down the water that broke forth. What they didn't realize was that they were drinking salt water. But by then it was too late. The pipeline had just been laid down by the engineering corps of the 8th Army and was still being tested with salt water. Fresh water was far too valuable for testing a pipeline. In the Germans' haste to quench their thirst, their bodies were actually becoming even more seriously dehydrated, which forced them to surrender. This account was in a book titled Pipeline to Battle by Major Peter Rayner of the Engineering Corps. He described the situation as nothing short of a miracle, divine intervention. Okay, amazing stuff. There's also stuff about how he went to buy his wife, he took a day off. The weather report, it was supposed to be terrible weather, it was okay. He went to buy a pair of shoes, a lot of stories. But this is the point, that this is the flag. The flag of our generation is that in the long run, and now it's not such a long run anymore because we see how things are turning out. We see that God is heating up the fire outside the land of Israel. The anti-Semitism, the growth of it, and the severeness of it, it's coming stronger and stronger and stronger. And the land of Israel, we see growing and flourishing, thank God. So it's not such the long run, but the idea is that when push comes to shove, and when the fat lady sings, the land of Israel is, and the mountains, Mount of Zion, and the hills of Jerusalem will be that refuge for the Jewish people. The Gra called outside the land of Israel a cemetery. Folks, understand, we're talking on two levels here. We're talking on two levels. Those Jews that came to the land of Israel, not only were they saved from the Holocaust, they were also saved from a spiritual Holocaust. Look what's going on in America. Those secular Jews that came here, thank God, most of them, the overwhelming majority, they're still marrying Jews. They're in a country, 75% of the population are Jews, so they're marrying Jews. And God willing, their children will come back to repentance. But it's not only a physical threat, it's also a spiritual threat outside the land of Israel. Last but not least, there's an amazing line by the commentator Magen Avraham. Magen Avraham, most of us are familiar with his Jewish law commentary. However, he also has a commentary on the Torah. And he writes in the portion of Yitro, in the book of Exodus, an amazing line. There's a verse in the portion of Yitro, Jethro. Why are the Jews of the land of Israel called the ones that I love? Why did the Jews of the land of Israel receive the title by God of the ones that I love? And the answer is an amazing answer. Our sages tell us that since they sacrificed their lives, even during times where according to the letter of the law they did not have to sacrifice their lives. There are laws pertaining to when a person is allowed to sacrifice their life. The Jews of the land of Israel would sacrifice their life for commandments that they were not obligated to sacrifice their lives. That is how they acquired the title of those that are loved by God. They could, now these are the words of the Magen Avraham. He says an amazing thing. The Jews of the land of Israel could have run away to find safety outside the land of Israel. But they chose to stick it out in the land of Israel, even though even though that it was dangerous, even though they were taking their lives into their own hands. And this is how they merited. This is how they merited the title of the loved ones of God. Amazing thing. We look at some of the 23,741 soldiers or Jews. It's not just soldiers, it's also Jews that were killed in Arab terrorism. And some of them were not religious. Some of them might have been even against religion. But when push comes to shove, these people gave their lives for the land of Israel, for the people of Israel, and eventually for the Torah of Israel. These are the loved ones. They could have ran away outside the land of Israel. They could have run, but they didn't. And these are the ones that are dear to God, not the ones that ran away for a so-called safe haven. Because at the end of the day, that safe haven is no longer. And we are right at the doorsteps, God willing, of the coming of the Messiah, and the safe haven here is in the land of Israel. May God allow all of us to return to ourselves, to return to the Torah, to return to the land of the Torah. Have a great and meaningful 33rd of the Omer.